4, I'd like to open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have roll call, please?
Good evening, Vince Smith from the clerk's office, standing in for Mr. Stepnitz. Mr. Carpenter? Here. Mr. Fitzer? Mr. Colber?
Here.
Mr. Casera?
Here.
Mr. Newshy? Ms. Redmond? Mr. Scott? Mr. Solomon?
Here.
Mr. Tinlin?
Here.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a quorum. Mr. Rick Scott excused himself last week. I knew he was going to be out of town. And Erin Redmond said she's going to be a little bit late, but she'll probably be here tonight. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any problems with the agenda as it stands? One thing I would like to change on the next agenda item, it says approval of the special meeting minutes from May 14th. Remove the word special. That was not our special meeting. That was a regularly scheduled meeting. And in that case, I will approve the agenda as it stands, and I'll look for a motion to approve our regular meeting minutes from May 14th.
I motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes from the May 14th, 2024 meeting.
Support.
And motion support. Anybody have any changes? Nothing. Can I have roll call on that, please?
Mr. Colber?
Yes.
Mr. Casera?
Yes.
Mr. Solomon?
Yes.
Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is public discussion, items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public wishing to opine on anything? Seeing none, I will then close public discussion, and we'll move on to agenda number 7. There's a site plan application for 14 East 14 Mile Road.
Hello, everyone. Yes, 14 East 14 Mile Road, which, as you can see from the photo in the review letter, is right next to the alley. It's all office, or that's his historical use anyway, the Avery Hasler building. And they're proposing to renovate the building and the facade. The interior layout's being changed, facilitated ground floor restaurant called Satellite. And the second floor is offices for IPQS, and I'll let the applicant kind of explain what both of those are in more detail. But as I said, really what we're here for is we're looking at the facade for the most part. There's a little bit about the interior later in the letter as it relates to parking requirements and things like that, but we'll get to that. So this entire site is 2,350 square feet. It's located on the south side of 14 Mile Road, east of Main Street. It's zoned CC City Center, and it's developed with a commercial building, which was formerly an office on both floors. The site's almost completely occupied by the building, except for a small walkway that runs behind or between it and Salon OG behind. And you can see on their plans, it shows that that's where deliveries come in through that back door there. Surrounding sites are all city center, all commercial, and of course that public alley is directly east. When we look at the dimensional requirements, I mean, they're not doing anything to the building that changes its dimensional requirements, but it's at the property line everywhere except the rear there, where it's a few feet from the property line. They're not changing anything substantial about the shell of the building, just its appearance. So we look at section 311 for the bulk of our standards within the city center district. We look at the building elements, the clearly defined internal spaces, building composition. We've got, big general compliance there. There's some more detailed notes on that later. So I looked at the parking for the restaurant use and the upper floor office. The upper floor is not a change of use, so there's really no circumstance when the use is staying the same where we would require additional parking or anything like that. So we're really looking at the restaurant. And that would require 16 parking spaces under most circumstances. Of course, this is a site that has absolutely no room for parking on it. So we have our modification of off-street parking requirement standards, which are included in the letter. And they've got the public parking for out front and then also in the lot back through the alley. So those spaces are waivable. Looking at transparency, the ground floor storefront definitely exceeds the transparency requirements of the ordinance. The upper floor doesn't have any windows facing the alley. The plan does propose to reduce the upper floor windows on the side that faces 14 Mile from 3 to 1. Section 34-311B2F requires the glazed area of a facade above the first floor shall be between 30 and 50% of the wall area, with each facade being calculated separately floor to floor. Windows shall maintain a consistent sill height, oriented vertically, unless the planning commission for the site plan agrees an exception for a decorative window element or similar feature. With the removal of the other two windows, that standard is not met. So that's something that's going to have to be discussed here tonight. Rooftop equipment's going to need to be screened to the south. The units that are up there are kind of far to the back of the building. The site's covered by the building, except for the accessway in the rear, which can't be blocked. So landscaping is kind of not really a thing that can be done here. If they do any kind of outdoor dining area, they could probably incorporate some plants into the barriers or something like that to affect some landscaping there. They're keeping the brick facade. They're actually removing the mansard roof that's on the building now, which those are prohibited in our downtown, so that's actually moving in the right direction. They're going to need a separate application for their signage. They have represented it on the plan, so you can kind of see what they have in mind. They're not proposing any additional lighting. They're maintaining the public sidewalks. So other than that one issue with the windows and the fact that they're going to need to screen that rooftop unit, the plan is pretty much in line with the CC district. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, but if you don't, we can go to the applicant and let them kind of walk you through their thoughts.
Any questions for Joe?
Joe, I think the only thing is just, and I don't want to take up too much time from the site application, right? But was curious about your perspective on the parking. Like I was trying to read that section of the report and just get your perspective. Obviously, landlocked. There's spaces in front.
Yep.
And then there's that shared lot in the back. But then you had mentioned like agreements with other businesses potentially for, off-hour operations, swap of like some spot. Like, do you have a perspective on this?
They don't really need it. They've got the public parking there,
Yeah.
and they can just use that. That's what all those businesses there are doing.
Right.
I mean, Nori is out there, and it's like there's no parking anywhere near it other than the one space in the front. So, yeah, we expect businesses on this lot to use the public parking.
Joe, just historically, when we had a change of use in that area, what did we do? What did the planning commission do then? I think before the Aruba Noodles, it was a Vietnam restaurant place, and before that, I think it was an office building. Did you know what historically done in the past about the parking?
Yeah, they've always waived and allowed the public parking to to function as the parking for this building. And the across the alley, Sabbath and Weiss Distillery, those are much more recent site plans, and they're all using the public parking. So it's really the only option for these sites. This Salon OG, Nori, the dentist office to the south, they just don't have any opportunity for parking.
Yeah, and I guess my main reason for bringing it up was potentially inclusion in the master plan to look at increased traffic, which is a good thing for the city, but how do we maintain parking around the city and make it accessible at different times and directions? And we talked about doing like lot colors and signs to be crystal clear about,
Yep.
if you're looking for parking and there's none available right behind it, there's one on the north side. So maybe it's just
Right.
something we can revisit after.
And that's actually in the draft of the downtown
Yeah.
master plan, yeah. Yep.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions for Joe?
Yeah, I have a question. So Joe, with the lack of, ability to landscape, do we have something that would offset that? And I wasn't finding anything like
Not really,
a certain
no,
proportion
yeah.
of, potted plants or, a certain requirement to just have some type of live greenery or something
Yeah.
out there?
We always encourage that, but we don't really have a requirement for it. Like I said, if they did like an outdoor dining area, if you put up a fence, you could incorporate planter boxes and things into that. But that's actually something to think about, I guess, for the future. But yeah, we don't really have like an offset requirement for that
Because the
circumstance.
CC doesn't really require landscaping, right? There's not a,
In certain circumstances, it does. If you're abutting, residential or something, then yes.
a setback and,
Yeah.
yeah,
But otherwise, no, it really doesn't.
okay.
There's just too many sites like this where it's just building and there's no opportunity really.
It might be something, I guess it's not the site plan, but to speak with DDA, I know they have a hard time maintaining all of those boxes, but if we
Sure.
could incorporate something in the future, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
That was my only question.
Okay.
Anything else for Joe? And would the applicant like to speak with us?
How's it going? I'm
Good.
Dennis
Good.
Weiss. I own Weiss Distilling Company, Sabbath Coffee Roasters, and I recently purchased this building, and Satellite is what I'd like to propose on the first floor. And then I own a tech company, and that would be on the second floor. The restriction on windows that I put up there is because it is a tech company going up there, so lights on screens aren't great, and there's a lot of lighting going inside of there, so I don't know what we can do to solve that, or if there is an issue there, but if you look at the plans, they look pretty cool. And I think it brings more people to the city, as we've seen with Sabbath and the distillery and Satellite. This is Chef Brennan, who would be running Satellite,
Hey, everybody.
so.
I was gonna say, we just had our food truck was a part of the Spring Open Air Festival about a week ago. And we're really excited to, be part of the city. And we're a really popular food truck for a couple of years. We were nominated 2 times for Best Food Truck in Detroit by our magazine. Myself, I've opened a number of successful restaurants as a chef over the years, never as an owner. But I've opened up, I was the original chef of Imperial in Ferndale, which I operated for 3 years. Then I opened Public House as well. Then I went downtown and I opened Townhouse, Detroit, which I ran for about a year. I also opened Carl's in Detroit. And my partner Damon is kind of a jack of all trades as well. So we would really love to bring our food and our style of hospitality to Clawson.
And what type of food are you looking at? I see the sign says tacos on it. We got a few taco
No,
places.
we don't serve tacos. We do, I would say that we're like a friendly neighborhood eatery. We started out as a food truck, which is obviously a limited amount of space, but we did like sandwiches and,
Burgers and fries and.
yeah, burgers, fries, wings, stuff of that nature, but we have a kind of an international twist to everything. I was fortunate to work for some Japanese chefs over the years and some Thai chefs, and I had a number of different experiences. I went to culinary school in Chicago. So we like to cook just a little bit left or right of center on your basic burger or your basic sandwich. So,
I assume you're going to go after a liquor license for this place.
yes.
We would, yeah.
You want to
We'd
sell
own it.
alcohol and beer and wine, right?
Yes, we plan on it. We both have, Damon and I also have years and years of bartending experience as well downtown Detroit. And I'm from Milwaukee, so I have some experience working there in the past as a bartender as well. So.
I don't have the set of prints in front of me. Normally I have a printed out copy to go by, but am I seeing you putting like a doorways on the alley side?
There
So you
would
can-
be
You can
an
exit the
entrance there.
building to the alley.
Yep,
Now, the alley, if I'm correct, wall to wall, that alley is city property, isn't it, Joe? So I have no problem with people stepping out there on city property, but you're not going to be putting up tables and chairs and serving food there. If you're going to serve food, you're going to have to serve it on 14 Mile Road side,
sure.
correct? Yeah, so I just saw that could be problematic if you, we don't want a restaurant taking over city property on it.
Sure. There are the tables out there that people do social district drinks.
Right.
That's still available. I mean, if they had to-go food and they ate out there,
You can't prevent them from grabbing a burger from your
Correct.
place and walking over and sitting there. Yeah, I get that, yeah. Parking seems to be a consideration, but I guess we're going to have to work that one out somehow.
and then the plan, sorry if I'm cutting you off, but there are planners planned out for there, from there. And then actually Brennan's wife owns Blooms, which is the new florist in town. So we could work with a local business to get planners out there that the restaurant would be in charge of taking care of.
Yeah, any type of landscaping requirements, my wife would be thrilled to do some planters. In fact, she just did the planters in front of, what's the new Irish bar?
Gus's?
Gus's, yeah, she
Gus's.
just did all the planters in front of Gus's, just about a week or two ago. So any nature of, big or small, she's very capable, her and her staff, so.
Cool.
And the business you're running on the second floor, that's not going to be high intensity, not a great deal of people coming and going.
No. Actually, we would probably have a lot of out-of-town people come to visit the tech company. It's mostly a remote business, but I have Yahoo coming in, wanting to come in. So they come to the distillery now, the coffee shop, and then an actual office would be nice for them, so.
So up and running, you'll probably get more business or more people through the restaurant than you would through the
Correct, yep.
business part. Any other?
I just had a question about the hours of operation for Satellite. Is it going to be breakfast, lunch, dinner, or is it going to be some?
It's gonna be, well, we're planning on shooting for like Wednesday through Sunday as our hours of operation. And we were gonna be doing breakfast every day with a very limited menu of like breakfast burritos and egg sandwiches, which will eventually expand as we, figure out how it's going. But then it'll swing into kind of our daily menu, which the hours will fluctuate, but the kitchen hours will probably be till 10 o'clock. On the weekends, bar hours, maybe midnight the latest for food. Yeah, and I think we would adjust our hours based on the, the need in the city and everything, but standard restaurant bar hours, yeah.
Yeah, and I had the opportunity at the open air fair to try the food. and it
Oh,
was
did you?
Fantastic.
Awesome, thank you.
And you could, yeah, I had a chicken pita that
Oh, you
was
had- you
obviously
had
like
the-
a spin, obviously on a standard.
Yeah,
kinda-
that's, we're from scratch, I mean, we do everything from scratch, we're actually working on, getting our sauce co-packed right now, so maybe someday you'll see that Meyer or something like that, so we're thinking big, we've been working on this for a number of years, so.
That's great. And then you guys have vegan options too.
We do, yeah, that's actually something I should speak on, is
Yeah.
that we are, we have a number of, probably half our, well, not half, but I would say a good third of our menu is vegan and vegetarian. We're very conscious of that, even in the fact that like we have 2 separate deep fryers. And we also, as far as our bar program goes, we plan on having a lot of, probably just as many like NA cocktails versus regular cocktails, mocktails, like an actual menu, so people that aren't into, bar culture can still come out and feel comfortable in the space, in a social setting, so.
Yeah, I think that meets a gap that we have today, right? We have a lot of bar food, but maybe not as much
Yeah.
of like high
Yeah, we're gonna
quality
have,
or vegan options.
We'll have some fresh options. I mean, obviously being able to expand from a food truck, we would have loved to, we ran a few salads as specials over the years, but a salad of a food truck is kind of counterintuitive, so it'll be nice to kind of be able to serve some of that fresh fare that we're definitely capable of doing, yeah.
Yeah, and we did link up with the architect from Tekoi. If you've ever been to Tekoi in Detroit, he did help plan out the whole space. Very popular, award-winning restaurant. And I kind of see the same thing for Satellite. It's very unique where the kitchen is in the middle, like a cross, or a satellite
Yeah.
space station. So everything we're doing is unique there and not really seen anywhere else, so.
a lot of intention. We could have easily set up a bar on the back wall. I think if what we did with David and I who are not architects, and we were fortunate. Ishid had our food and we sent him a vision board. He kind of knows what we're about, and it was really neat because he just blew our minds with his design, and I think we're going to be able to do something really special on this corner in Clausen. So.
I guess the only other concern that was outlined was the transparency on the windows for your business on the second floor. So you mentioned concerns, obviously, with light coming in and people trying to work on computer screens. I don't know if there's options. Maybe, Joe, you have perspective from other site plans around like a blacked out version of a window. Does that, like, transparency, does it have to be full transparency in terms of like a glass window, or could there be other options?
Church of Clausen.
Also did that actually, and full transparency is required on the ground floor. We need windows on the upper floor, but the transparency requirement is not as stringent on the upper floor. So if there was, some architectural way we could get to the requirement without compromising their environment, then yes, that would be acceptable.
Well, and how many square feet is the top floor?
2,100.
2,100, okay. Yeah.
Would you guys be opposed to, if it was requested by the body, to do something that's literally
Yeah.
just, because I think Church of Clausen, there's not even visibility out.
I don't think they're real windows.
Well, they-
Right, so they're literally just reflective in the
It
Those
looks
are
like a real
TVs.
window from outside. It gives you that architectural look that it's a window. But
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean that as an insult or
No,
anything, but
that met
like,
the requirement though, right? Was that true?
Yeah.
And it was strictly, it wasn't even functional.
Is the requirement on this first or second floor?
This is there's a requirement for the first, which are medium with flying colors, and then there's a requirement for the second, which is what's not medium.
Okay.
hey, Joe, what's the requirement on the first floor again? I mean, is there an offset to that? Like they're 30% over, so we can maybe
Yeah.
compromise on a 30 on the top floor kind of thing?
It doesn't really work that way in the language. They are way over on the ground floor, I will say that.
You don't know by how much, though. I know it doesn't work in the language, but if we're looking to like possibly try to come to a,
Yeah, based on the rendering, I mean, if it's supposed to be 30 to 50%, it looks more like 70%.
yeah.
It is roughly 70%.
Yeah. So, something to consider.
Would you guys be able to come further into compliance with that if they were not required to be completely, like you can tint them so that sun's not beaming in?
That was part of the conversation is if we tinted them or put blackout shades, what's the point in like digging into the building further? So it is an
Digging
old
in?
building.
Because aren't there existing windows?
There are, but they're like shorter and they're very old. And there's like 3 layers of brick on there, so you have to be very careful. And digging, I mean, filling them is probably safer than building new ones, because we would want longer ones and stuff like that. But I'm down
Okay.
to change it up. I mean, we can talk to the architect, but if we could go how it is now, would also be good.
What, sorry, but what,
Of course.
do you remember what percentage they are right now, Josh? Or not to put you on the spot?
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh,
I just know
okay.
that the requirement was 30 to 50% based on
On
the
the
language I
upper-
saw.
Yeah, on the upper, it's gotta be.
So they're probably meeting that today in the current format, but,
They're at like just at 30%.
okay.
They're at 30 now. Okay, so that's going to be like 10% then or something. That's pretty, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue, but I want to stay within compliance as much as possible, so I don't know. That's why I said if it was just decorative even,
Yeah.
being outside of
This is
the
a-
wall without digging back in, you can still brick it.
Yeah, this is the south elevation we're looking at, right? There's 2 windows there now that you're proposing to close off.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was 3
So
total,
that's-
take 2 out.
The back of the building facing the alleyway.
There aren't any in the alley.
Yeah,
Pardon?
so this is north facing 14 Mile that we're talking about, yeah.
Oh, this,
And I don't think the
Well,
alleyway would even count,
mine says
right?
south elevation
Yeah, the
on this.
alleyway doesn't, that.
It has to be like
that-
facing the main street,
Exactly,
right?
It's facing the primary street, yeah.
So with the middle window, you're not using the existing window to dig out
Well,
and put
they
that
are
there?
using the existing part and connecting it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think.
It looks like the same footprint as the current.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks pretty close.
I mean, even if they weren't the full expansion of the front, I don't know.
Do we find
So
that?
this is purely aesthetic, like, that's the main reason behind this requirement.
That's really what it is,
So if we were to waive it, it's just for look and feel to match downtown.
What's the ZBA think about something?
yeah. Yeah, you don't really have a legal provision.
It's not a
in
hardship,
there,
then
so
we wouldn't pass it.
Something we gotta deal with.
Oh, okay.
It's just a matter of doing away with two of the windows, blocking them in, or sealing them off inside, just leaving them there and sealing them. It depends on what we're going to see on the outside of the building. To me, it's an architectural style. I like the looks of the new design.
Right.
I mean, I do too, but I kind of am a stickler on, it might not be, I don't know what your future plans are if you're there forever, but it's a building that's gonna be there for a very long time, and to take it from compliance to out of compliance feels like we're going backwards a little to me, just my opinion. I deferred to ZBA. He has insight on, if we did send it to ZBA, what
Would they
they
grant
might.
a
Yeah, I mean, being that it's not really a hardship or a financial hardship, so we probably wouldn't pass it if it came across us, but, I mean, within reason. I mean, if it's 3 layers of brick and we would allow like a non-transparent window, I mean, could you do that on the outer layer
Sure,
per
yeah.
se?
I mean, I can't speak to it because I would have the architect do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure we could do it to comply with it, that's fine.
I think it could be made a condition of approval to come into compliance with that.
Yeah.
In a way that works architecturally and preserves the compliance of the facade.
So the windows would remain whether they work or not, whether you can see out them or not? That's-
Yeah, essentially, yeah, there's gonna be something there from the outside, but when you get inside the building, it may not actually be.
It aesthetically would look correct to us, we have
Yeah.
all the windows there, but they're just non-functioning windows.
Yeah, I mean, when I was just speaking about it, I was actually thinking if they really wanted to, I don't know the right word, is secure the building, right? Like build more foundation behind the building, they could brick it off and still put a purely decorative looking window on the outside that didn't function. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't impact your employees, but it would function to look aesthetically like windows all
Yeah,
across.
we can do that, that's fine.
As an
I just have to
option.
talk to the architect and get that back to you all.
I don't know if it's more expensive or less expensive, or if that's what you want, but maybe that's a
Everything costs
possibility.
money.
Just as a.
No, I mean, I want to be in compliance. It's not a big deal to me. Ish has a vision, and so we go with it. So I didn't even know that was really an issue, is the size of the windows and stuff. But we'll fix it. We'll make it whatever. It's fine. But what I would ask if we could conditionally approve it so that we can get working, because I have a team ready that wants to take off the top and everything.
Yeah, so you're getting started right away.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
we've demoed the inside, which we have a permit for.
Thank
But
you.
then when we want to do the outside, this whole thing started. So.
Okay, did you speak to rooftop yet? Were you aware of that already and already had plans to do the screening on the rooftop?
So this is to take off. I don't know what it is. A man's thing.
It's a mansard roof. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can remove the roof that's there, but you want to screen off your air conditioning units and everything
Yeah.
else. from this
I think that's a
space.
parapet wall on this building, right? So it's the walls above the roof line, so you probably don't even need it.
It's not above if you look at it, it's not above
The units.
The units?
The units are kind of.
So it still needs some type of rooftop screening.
That's fine.
And it can't be plastic zip ties.
Yeah, like a fence. Is there an approved list or? of material?
I mean, it's supposed to be like compatible with the building, but we're kind of,
Yeah, people have used wood and bricks and all kinds of, like,
Aluminum siding,
yeah, I mean, I like corrugated board.
plastic lattice work.
There's a lot of-
Seen a lot of it, yeah.
Okay, it's not a big deal.
So where would we stand this? Do we want to approve a site plan with limitations that We're not sure what we want done with windows. Do we want them to
Well,
keep the windows and blank them out or brick them in?
Yeah, it sounds like, it can be made compliant, and the applicant's willing to bring it to compliance. It's just we don't have a plan in front of us, so it should be conditionally, possibly conditionally approved.
I'm okay with that.
yeah. Okay.
So then I would look for a motion with conditions.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the site plan application for 14 East 14 Mile Road with the conditions of the windows being in compliance and rooftop screening.
Support.
Motion support. Is everybody happy with that? Anybody want to change anything? We'll go as is. Can I have roll call on that, please?
Excuse me, what about the parking waiver?
Oh, does that have to be in the thing?
Yeah, I get.
Oh, okay. You want to amend it?
Attach it to it, yeah, just add 2 years.
You want me to amend it, or you
Or
want to
I motion to amend to add the waiver for parking requirements.
still support?
Support.
You agree?
I
with
support.
Okay, still good with your parking in there. Can I have roll call on this, please? Thank you.
Mr. Solomon? Yes. Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Colbert?
Yes.
Mr. Casera?
Yes,
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Motion passes.
thank you. Welcome to Clausen, again. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is discussion of the draft master plan modules.
We're not looking at the whole thing tonight. For various reasons, there was parts of it that weren't quite ready. So we're gonna talk about some of it tonight and some of it next time.
Joe, I'm so sorry. I was late. Do you have a copy for me?
Yes, we do. Yeah, one of these. Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem.
Thank you.
So, starting out, one of the things that was included in your packet was the opening chapter of the plan, which is kind of starts out with an intro and then gets into the data element of it, demographics, economics, et cetera. One of the things I wanted to discuss tonight is, and if you don't have a response to this tonight, that's okay. You can always respond next time. Is just, we have this intro couple of paragraphs called "What is a master plan?" and then we have a following section that says, "What does this update do?" And I'd just like to make sure everybody's confident that it's clear about why we're doing this, and it conveys it, in terms that anyone can understand. I get it. I understand what the scope is, right? But sometimes I just want to make sure that it's written in a way that's very digestible and that people are going to understand, okay, this is what this update does and what it's for.
So is the thoroughfare plan, you said, okay, so the intro and then what it does, the thoroughfare plan is what it
So I'm
does?
on this document.
Oh,
This is one of the ones that
sorry.
was emailed, yeah. Yep. So it just basically explains, what is a master plan? What's our authorization for doing one? Why do we look at it every 5 years, et cetera? And then, what does this update do? It lays out the modules and what we're trying to do with each one of them, and then, kind of relates it to the 2018 master plan that we're trying to build on that last master plan, and that's why we're doing an update rather than like a full new master plan. And like I said, if you don't have like a full response tonight, that's totally fine. You can always spend some time with it and let me know next time. That's completely fine. The rest of the chapter, I don't know that there's much detail to get into here. If anybody has any questions or observations or anything, that's I welcome them. But basically, what we're doing is we're summarizing population data. We're comparing Clawson to some of our surrounding communities over time. We're talking about, what our household composition is, our population of school-age children, how all these various changes that have occurred and are occurring in our population might affect our future.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you want us to just interrupt, or you want us to wait?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Okay,
no, I'd rather go as we go.
Okay, is there, I mean, I know our last master plan had these kind of statistics in it as well. But is there any benefit to having like a delineation of, the type of, how many multifamily, especially when we're talking so much about multifamily and how many zones we want to put multifamily in, looking at different, communities surrounding us and, how many, housing units are composed of multifamily versus single-family homes versus townhomes versus, like, to get a full idea of what that might look like. I, for one, would find it beneficial, especially when we're talking about, the missing middle and have things to compare it to. That's just something that went through my head.
Right, so it's on page, oh, there's no page numbers. What happened to those? That were supposed to be page numbers. On,
Page 33.
yeah, so it says housing here, and then there's some tables.
Okay.
It is compared to the county and the state as a whole. So we have about 55% of the city's land is single-family homes. About 20% of the housing's in multifamily dwellings. 23% of Oakland County, 22% of Michigan as a whole. Didn't have any of the surrounding communities in there, but that's what we've got. So at this point is as points of comparison is Oakland County and Michigan as a whole.
So you have us with 50, okay.
Yeah, so
20%
single-family
is
housing.
multifamily you have us with?
Yeah, 20%, exactly.
Okay. And what about density? Would that be an important value to look at? Like.
Clawson's aggregate density.
Yeah. I was surprised that our density was much higher than even Detroit, or,
Well,
especially
Detroit has low density because it's 139 square miles and half the neighborhoods aren't there
Very
anymore.
good point, very good point. But even, Ferndale, we're more dense than Ferndale. Just something to kind of keep in mind, especially from a planning perspective, I think. And coming upon, we're almost, aside from Shalom and the school sites, we're pretty much landlocked, right? We can only go up. So I think density might be an important thing to consider. If somebody disagrees, you can tell me. Anybody?
Yeah, otherwise, we talk about the workforce, we talk about our kind of economic numbers, median household income, which is, there's sort of an interesting story in there, actually, with median household income and how it's risen quite a bit, and the educational attainment level of residents has also risen on average. So those two things are rising in tandem. I don't think it's a coincidence. The other just overarching narrative there is the gradual decrease in average household size, which is occurring not just here but everywhere. And really, you have to globally, you have to go outside of the OECD to get to places where household size is not decreasing. It's just a global, it's becoming a global phenomenon, and global population is actually expected to peak around 2070, and then start going down. So we're probably gonna have about 9.5 billion people on Earth in 2070, and by the end of the century, it's gonna be substantially less than that, like 200 million people less than that. So just thinking extremely long term, the only way the United States is growing right now is through immigration. We have a shrinking population if people aren't moving here from elsewhere in the world. Eventually, there are going to be fewer people to move here from elsewhere in the world. And just at kind of like a macro societal level, we have absolutely no framework for dealing with that. We're used to growth, 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 and that's how we grow. We grow by literally growing the number of people. And at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to have to find an economic paradigm that allows us to grow economically without growing
AI.
by people.
There we go.
Yeah,
Solved.
just grow with robots
Yeah.
filling in the rest of it. But it's not really something we can deal with at the municipal level necessarily.
But I do think that there's value, Joe, and I know we've talked about it before, the percentage of households with children versus not.
Yep.
And like Clawson is, I did my own little weird table thing, so never mind me. But like Clawson's at like 16%.
low.
Which is super low. And then you look to like, let's see, what is it? Well, Huntington Woods and Troy and, those communities are in the 20s, 30s.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important point from a planning perspective as well, because, when we look at what we're trying to bring in here, it's very apparent we want kids.
Yeah, well, and you're also dealing with a regional school age population that's declining. So it's like, where are they going to come from is a major question.
Yeah. And I
It's-
think that's partly out of our hands a little bit, right? Like school
Right.
systems themselves have to be a little bit competitive.
Yeah.
But I do think that the more opportunities we make for families, the easier it is for them to, see that opportunity here.
Yeah, and it wasn't really that long ago that those numbers would have been in the 50s as opposed to the 20s, I mean, it just really, the suburbs grew on the backs of growing families in the mid-20th century, and that's just not where they are right now. And the thing is, a lot of people who had their kids 20, 30 years ago are still living in those houses, and a family can't move into the house and as long as that person's still living there. And it's not like we're going to say, well, get out of there.
Well, no, but I'm thinking in terms of, there's a lot of communities that I see that are putting in condos, and I don't know necessarily how we might incentivize. I think we've talked about it before, but how do we incentivize like home ownership, condos, families, established families here versus just more efficiency in one-bedroom apartments? Like, I would love to explore ways we can, like, especially that missing middle as we're transitioning, find ways to, like, really incentivize within this master plan update those type of, condos that might be 3-bedroom and someone's transitioning their family there,
Well, I mean, I think there's a few different things to think about there. One is that you need more small apartments with the vast growth in single occupant households. They're needed everywhere because there just are a lot more households that need that kind of unit. So that is just a necessary part of the mix. Now, if you don't want efficiency units, one of the things that we could probably do is change the way we look at multifamily units, because right now there's an incentive to do an efficiency unit because you don't have to provide as much parking. If you had the same parking requirement for a 1-bedroom unit that you have for an efficiency unit, people would do one-bedroom units. They probably wouldn't do efficiency units. And, you know, we require the third space for a three-bedroom unit, whereas you can build a 7-bedroom home and only have 2 parking spaces. So there's some disincentives going on in our ordinance to the larger family supporting units, and then there are some incentives going on for the smaller one-room units.
But how do we establish something that incentivizes a condo, like something that
You
people are going to
can't
buy and own and stay here for a while?
You can't really,
No.
because ownership is just not a question of zoning.
But we might make it more incentivizing for a builder to think condos are a good, you know, investment over an apartment building.
Possibly. I mean, I guess I would have to research how you might do that, but one of the other things to consider is that, you know, I just did a master plan for Farmington Hills, and their housing mix is like almost 50% multifamily. But the conversation we had to have was, that's all multifamily that was built in the 60s, and no one wants that type of unit anymore. And some of it's really tired. So what do we do to incentivize the redevelopment of that, or the transition of that to something else? And that's something that I think we deal with a little bit here too, because a lot of our largest multifamily is from that era. It's older, and it's not really necessarily the target property of people who are looking for attached housing or rent. You do have to have rental housing because some people really prefer renting.
Oh, yeah, I'm not saying to do away with efficiencies or rentals. I'm just getting a mix in there would be great. And also, I've brought this up before too, but like finding out about our future of condo conversions, I think is a huge liability for the city, because these multifamilies, if, you know, they keep coming in front of us and saying, oh, they each have their own utilities, and it's like, oh, that's because you're gonna condo convert after maybe they've already, you know, depreciated for 30 years. And then the city's stuck with not subliminal, but like not subpar, you know, housing, right? And those are all gonna be failing condo communities, not necessarily, but they could be. I shouldn't say they are going to be, but things like that. I mean, that's not in 2070. That's like 25 years from now.
Yeah. And there are other macro things, I guess, to think about too. Like right now, the federal tax system doesn't incentivize homeownership because the standard deduction has grown to the point that a mortgage deduction for most people doesn't even count now. You just take the standard deduction. So there's no real tax benefit to becoming a homeowner right now. And unless that changes, you might see more and more slippage toward renting,
Yeah.
which has been the trend since about 2018 when that tax law went into effect.
Well, and I'm about homeownership for way more reasons than just, you know,
Sure.
just, you know,
Well, it's a
non-transient
wealth
uses,
it's a
but
wealth building
Yeah.
tool, and it's one of the few ways that people build equity, unless they're just really savvy investors or something.
right. Well, but if you look at communities, even it does seem like there is a clear line where if you look at West Bloomfield, they might be at 70 or 80% home ownership versus a city that maybe not as popular or, you know, whatever, high income as West Bloomfield might be flipped around. We'll just say Detroit is like, I don't know, 60% probably renters versus homeowners. So I do think that speaks to the city as well. I don't know if do you know of anything, like, is there a study that's done about that or no?
I mean, I guess the counterpoint to that, though, is like downtown Minneapolis is 100% rental and way higher income than.
Is that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's definitely different aspects to the rental market, and when you get into downtown type environments, you tend to have fairly wealthy residents living in rental housing, Whereas in other places, rental housing tends to be more of a downscale, lower income housing arrangement. So
Okay.
it's a different market depending on where you are and the type of environment that's around the units that you're building.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to note is that I didn't include too many SEMCOG projections in this. I included a few here and there. What I've found going through SEMCOG data recently is that there's a pattern to the projections for 2050, which is every single one of them is that things are going to go slightly up by 2050. And it's just kind of, it's like too uniform. Like they're all saying that household size is going to tick back up by 2050, but there's no explanation behind why that projection is being made. And almost every population projection for a municipality on SEMCOG's data portal is that its population is going to like level out and go up slightly. And to me, that just looks like, well, they can't all be the same like this. They can't all have the same future, and everything can't just tick up slightly by 2050. It just seems weird to me, so I left a lot of those projections out, whereas we used to include them a lot. And I was looking at them and just thinking, this seems like doesn't have a lot of value to me. So
Well,
we
that's always
didn't-
abstract too, right?
Well, it is very abstract, definitely. And there are different methods you can use, constant percentage over time, or you look at the change in percentage over time and assume that will continue or something. So there's lots of different ways to do it, but it just seemed like that agency's projections were just, there was a pattern to them, and I didn't see anything that explained why anywhere in their literature. So it just seemed like, okay, I'm going to skip this projection, and we'll focus on the story up to now. I kind of wrapped this up with a little discussion of land use implications. Decreasing population directly relates to the reduced number of persons per household. It's been the trend in Clawson. It's been the trend everywhere. Berkeley used to have 7,000 or 8,000 more people living in it than it does now, just by virtue of the fact that it used to have lots of large families in it. So Clawson's by no means an isolated case here. To maintain a stable population, more housing units are going to be necessary. Only opportunities to add housing units are by infill or redevelopment. We're probably going to also have demand for a greater variety of housing types, especially for those that accommodate small households, including one-person households or senior residents moving out of their larger homes. Outside of Clawson Manor, we don't have a ton of senior housing. We've got the one up here as well, but there's not a lot of other options for senior-focused housing. And if we do get any new build senior-focused housing, I think you'd want to make sure that it's being built in a way that 20 years from now it could be converted to just more general housing. You wouldn't want it to be all little units with no kitchen or anything like that. You'd want it to be something that's going to be functional with a different population in the future, because once the tapir moves through the snake or whatever, you've got this big bulge moving through the population. Once that kind of is gone, you're not going to have that level of senior population again. So we have to be thinking about that, for the future. It does look like our under 18 population is likely to continue to decline over time. There's not much opportunity to draw in families from surrounding communities, as that population's also decreasing in those communities. Clawson's relative affordability for its location may help attract some households in those family-forming years, but turnover in the housing market is not really keeping pace with that natural decline to allow those families in. So there might be a tipping point there where enough inventory comes on the market to allow that population to move in a little more vigorously. But for right now, it's kind of a drip. We have unknowns, of course, that are going to affect our future population. Migration occurs at a lot of different levels. So we have in-region migration. You could have some local households moving into the city. You could also see them leave the city for other places in the area. Maybe they go move out to Washington Township for a big house or something. You have migration from out of state or across the state. Michigan hasn't seen any significant net domestic immigration for decades, but that could change because climate change is intensifying across the American Sun Belt. That might reverse some of the domestic migration trends of the last 40 years. It's not guaranteed by any means, but 645 people died from heat in Phoenix last year. That doesn't feel sustainable to me, and also the water situation out there is getting really bad. You might find that Maricopa County hits its limit of people sometime in the next 20 years, and those people start to flow back. It may happen across the South too, as hotter temperatures get more and more entrenched. You may see people moving to this region. Very speculative at this point, but nevertheless, it's something that could happen, and that would definitely be, to the benefit of a city like Clawson. Immigration from abroad, primary factor in stabilizing Michigan's population since 1990, was once a major factor in the state's rapid growth. The political direction of the country at the federal level is going to have some effect on immigration. Clawson may be able to find some strategies to make itself appealing to immigrants who tend to have more children than native families. But, that is also a trend that changes generationally, right? The first generation tends to have a larger family. The second generation, they're Americans, and they do what Americans do. They have the same size family. So just some things to think about, for the future and kind of where we're all headed. I'll do the parking chapter next, because really what this builds up to is just a framework for how we're going to think about assessing our parking requirements after this plan is adopted. I've got some background here. I think we all kind of are broadly familiar with the story of the automobile becoming the principal means of travel in the decades around World War II. And the way that we built our suburbs was very auto-oriented and became more auto-oriented over time. Clawson kind of landed in this sweet spot where it was built in a more walkable way because the interurban network still existed when it was first established and grew. And it sort of got retrofitted to accommodate the car. So, back in those interurban days, a lot of what's parking lot now would have been building. And because the interurban system went away and everybody had to get around by car, it all became parking lot. If you go to cities in Europe with great transit, there's no parking anywhere. There's parking garages here and there, but you won't find a surface parking lot anywhere. It's just not something that takes up space in those cities. And that's just not the pattern we have here. We have a sprawling metro that is built around the car. And it's just the way this region is. So parking spaces are a necessary component of most development in this region. But it does have a lot of negative impacts on the urban fabric of a city. And Most of it from a single-family driveway to a large lot for a shopping center is empty or mostly empty for significant portions of the day. It's just sort of wasted land sitting there. And there are spots in some larger parking lots that might fill up once or twice a year, but they're still there all the time as pavement on the ground. We set aside a great deal of land for temporary storage of vehicles, a minority of the time. And that land is covered with impervious surfaces. They don't absorb stormwater. We need to put stormwater management systems in because of that. Land is scarce in Clawson. Those have to go underground. That comes at a cost. And that comes in addition to the cost of installing the parking lot itself. It's almost $20,000 a space to put in a parking lot these days with current construction costs. So those costs have to go somewhere. They're ultimately absorbed by tenants and their rents, that's commercial or residential tenants, and consumers and the prices they pay at establishments operating on those sites. So we're trained to think that we have free parking everywhere, but we do not have free parking. If there's one thing you walk away from this meeting with, let it be that. Parking is not free anywhere. You pay for it every time you buy something. And you're basically always getting a little bit of the cost transmitted to you in the goods that you're buying and or the rents that the businesses that you're patronizing are paying, and the the rents that you might pay if you're living on in a multifamily development. Impervious surfaces, especially dark asphalt, absorb heat from the sun that's radiated back into the atmosphere. Parking lots are significantly hotter than other areas on hot days. The release of accumulated heat overnight keeps a heavily paved area from properly cooling down after the sun sets. You can mitigate that somewhat with landscaping, tree canopy, and things, but it only partially alleviates the effect. Beyond the effects of the pavement itself, the land occupied by parking takes up space and pushes buildings further apart. It's sort of a self-reinforcing thing where you have to put the parking in, the buildings have to be further apart. That necessitates more driving. More people driving needs more parking. Things get further and further apart. It's part of the reason that the pattern in American suburbs is that the further out you go and the later something was built, the further apart things are and the more parking you see. And then, of course, we also put aside more land because parking is ugly, so we want to block it with landscaping and other things, and that also takes up space. Our buffer, I wrote it here, the city's buffer requirements for parking are an implicit acknowledgement that no one particularly wants to look at parking lots or experience their effects unless they have to. So, to sum up, we're trying to strike a balance. We want to make sure that we're providing enough parking to meet the needs of residents and businesses, but also that we're not building excessive parking that largely lies unused, but contributes to environmental problems and sprawling development patterns, which is why we're looking at assessing parking requirements and demand. And I've given basically a two-phase process and then some analysis tools that we can use once we get into this. The two-phase process is pretty simple. One is determine the uses to be regulated. So one thing that, it's kind of like zoning ordinance hygiene a little bit, is look at the list of uses that you're permitting in your districts, and then look at the list of uses that are listed in your parking table. They almost never match. And this is just a symptom of the fact that zoning ordinances were adopted in the 50s, 60s, 70s. The parking table, the uses that are listed there may have once sort of matched what was listed in the districts. But as things get tweaked and changed over time, they don't necessarily change everywhere, and the lists sort of get out of sync with each other. And sometimes the uses that are listed in the parking table are just, they're either out of obsolete or there's just a gap where something that's very common today but wasn't common when the zoning ordinance was first adopted just isn't there. It's just not addressed. So that's kind of the first thing that I would recommend doing is let's look at our use list. Let's look at our list in the parking requirements and see if we can harmonize them and then move forward from there, trying to figure out what the right amount to require for each of these uses is. There are a lot of different levels of analysis that can be applied to the study of parking requirements. And most of them I would recommend not using alone. I would recommend using them in combination with other uses. So I've split these up into resource-independent analysis tools and resource-dependent analysis tools. So resource-independent, I'm considering those resource-independent because using the tools doesn't require extra capital investment. It's something that's available to us, and we can access it. So study of data and recommendations from the Institute of Transportation Engineers is one thing we can look at. So they estimate parking demand based on observational data, but there is criticism of the ITE manual out there. Donald Shoup, who is kind of known in planning circles as like the parking expert, notes that ITE's observations are almost uniformly made in low-density suburban environments. And when I say low-density, I mean like out on the edge of things like Lyon Township level densities. That's where a lot of those observations are made. And they're also generally made in environments with poor transit and pedestrian infrastructure. Well, we've got the poor transit, definitely, but we don't have poor pedestrian infrastructure. We actually have really good pedestrian infrastructure here. And they reflect peak demand in that environment. So they tend to shoot high in terms of how much parking they want to require. You can use it as a reference, but it should be only one point of comparison for a study. Analysis of requirements from other zoning ordinances in peer communities is another tool that's commonly used. The thing is, they have sort of the same history behind their parking requirements that we do, where there's this old zoning ordinance that was the origination point for it. And they've done piecemeal updates the same way we have. So, you know, also not a sole method for review. Combine the two and you're starting to get somewhere. Searching for alternative data and recommendations to ITE. There are other studies of parking demand. A lot of them are specific to particular communities or districts. Downtown Clawson was the subject of its own parking study not that long ago. And those can be useful in combination with the other analysis tools. Some of them might be paywalled, others are going to be public documents. And then discussion with market actors is another thing that we could do. We could do some focus groups. Local property owners, business owners, developers, we could do a focus group with residents. Where are you finding that you're having trouble? You know, just to talk about day-to-day demand.
Wasn't that on our map?
Yeah,
like, were
we
you
did
having
some of
trouble?
that. Yes,
And-
we did some of that with the map.
And
yeah.
does it take into consideration like what you're trying to achieve with your parking? Is there like, when you use one of these tools, is it like, what are you trying to achieve? I always point to the fact that Clawson's unique in the way that we don't have on-street parking overnight. So it might not, the same models might not work here that they would in other places.
Right, and that's kind of the point, is that, yeah, no model is going to perfectly map onto your community. And that's why you got to look at lots of different things in order to arrive at something sensible. Now, I do point out a resource-dependent analysis tool, which is actually doing field observations in your own community. Diverse times, different days, different times of year, really trying to actually observe sites in your own community and see what is actually going on here. We've got this many parking spaces for this use. Is it being used? Is it sitting half empty all the time? Are there people constantly circling because they can't find a space? Now, you could do that, you know, you might just target multifamily development or something, just to see how those parking lots fill up. But you might also be more interested in looking at some of your commercial areas. Now, the thing about that is you can do it with cameras, just sort of taking a photo every hour or something, and then you look at the compiled data and you see sort of a time lapse effect, and then you kind of ballpark the actual demand from there. But it's definitely something that takes a lot of time. It takes resources. Like I said, you have to have the equipment to do it, or the person who can go and make the observation, right? So that's kind of another level of analysis that most communities just never really get to.
Why wouldn't we just ask the neighbors? Like especially in commercial, I know that there are certain headaches for sure that would be willing to say every Tuesday it's,
Yeah.
but
Well,
I
that's the
also think
discussion
that.
with market actors, yeah.
But-
That's really where you get people to sit down and say, well, here's what I'm experiencing from my location.
Right. Well, in that, we kind of have a small enough community where I almost feel like where there's that kind of parking, we kind of already have resources there, I guess. Maybe I'm ignorant to that, but it seems like most people have been here for a while. Like they know, if you're working in one of those buildings, you know what spots are always taken.
Sure.
Probably, right? Would that be more of a focus group kind of thing, or?
I think it is, yeah. I think it's a focus group kind of thing, where you get people together and you kind of talk through it and say, all right, where are you located? What's your experience? And then you can kind of look at the data for that site and say, well, here's what your square footage is and how many things you've got in there, and here's how many spaces there are. We're hearing there's not enough, we're hearing there's too much. And you can kind of build a sort of model off of that.
Right,
basically.
and include density and stuff. Is this something you're looking to do prior to enacting the master plan, or something that you're
After.
looking to?
Yeah, I think this would be
work
kind of like a
towards?
project after we adopt the master plan update.
Okay, so we're not committing to,
You're not committing to anything, no.
okay, but even in our master plan, we won't have, a developer that comes in here and says, oh, because of this thing in your master plan, now you have to give me,
No,
whatever
we're not,
for one parking spot.
we're not making any recommendations in the master plan on specifics. So we're basically
Okay.
saying we need to analyze this and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Because as far as I heard from maybe not DDA themselves, I don't want to misspeak, but we don't have enough parking.
Well, so it's funny you should say that, because what the parking study that was done there actually says is there's a ton of parking downtown. The problem is that a lot of it's not accessible to the public.
Well, don't you refer to it as privately held parking, and only about 38% is actually controlled by the city, correct?
Exactly,
And that study
yeah.
did show that there was adequate parking, but it was
Exactly.
privately held.
There's plenty of parking in downtown. The problem is you can't park there. for a
Okay,
lot
so
of
it's,
it.
I can imagine, west of Main Street on 14 Mile, those lots are super deep, right? And those,
Sure, yeah.
those might account for that, but are you saying that we would allow a bigger footprint of a building there? Like, what would be the solution to that? Or
Well-
have you said something before about the city buying up parts of that lot?
Well, I mean, there are lots of different ways you can go. If the city was able to acquire more land to make into public parking, or to enter into agreements with some users that when they're closed, that's public parking, it would go a long way toward alleviating some of the crunch that you feel over there.
Okay, because I would say buildings are just, they're impervious as well, just as much as parking
they
lots.
are.
And it would be great to turn it all into a green space, right? But are we just taking one impervious surface and placing a big building impervious surface on
Well,
it?
I mean, you'd be replacing one impervious surface with an impervious surface that actually gets used most of the time. So
okay.
there is a difference. I mean, this parking lot over here downtown there's not a car in it for most of the night, and it just sits there with rain collecting on it, basically.
one?
So, well, really any of them.
I've always seen them full. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm at the wrong city.
At 2 a.m. though?
Well, at 2 a.m.,
Yeah,
you're
they're
not supposed to park there, I don't
Yeah,
think.
exactly. They're empty,
I
and
think
they're
you'll
just
get a ticket.
they're just sitting there sheeting rainwater toward a catch basin, you know?
Oh.
Whereas a building, you know, it's got somebody in it or it's storing something, you know?
Okay.
But, I mean, that's parking in a nutshell. I did point out that one area over by Kinross that we know just there's a whole little row of businesses there that just doesn't have access to parking. And kind of try to point to some strategies for dealing with that. The other component that we've got here, we got, well, two, actually. One is the future land use map.
Can I ask you a question before we switch off parking?
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out, you mentioned it briefly, and I'm just trying to figure out, is it kind of all-inclusive, or is there a specific portion of the master plan where we should talk specifically about the current requirements for building? You mentioned, especially with not even multi-use, sorry, residential. So we talked about different unit sizes requiring different parking. Do we want to explore that further in an actual line item on this parking master plan? Or are you saying that this falls into different ways that we could analyze from neighboring communities, focus groups?
It does.
How do you see that? Because I just, since I've been part of this board, it's come up at least, once a quarter.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I would love to get more data on to make an informed decision. Besides just hearing from one builder saying, well, this is why we're doing efficiency units, because this requirement. I just curious to see what other neighboring communities do. I think you built that before in one of our packets, but
Yeah.
how do we explore it in a way that we can make an informed decision if we want to revisit that in any capacity?
Yeah. It's not specifically mentioned. It is kind of blanketed by what's in here. We could call it out specifically if you feel like it's a thing that we should be specific about. But it would be part of any larger parking analysis for sure.
I kind of almost feel like we should leave it a little bit ambiguous because it might change. And then also, like if it's, I don't know if we're doing any exact line item things at all in the master plan, or if it's something that we work towards. Because in 5 years, someone, or I guess not 5 years, we redo it in 5 years, but like 4 years, someone could be like, oh, did we ever do, I don't know. To me, it seems.
Well, yeah, and that's my question, I guess, for Joe, is it always, this so far feels a little too vague, where nothing ges done. So just curious.
But just an intentional statement of what we're looking to address specifically. Yeah.
I think that's page 37, Joe. You have a rough scope of assessing parking requirements and demand, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it is. That's the deliverable there, or the future project, I guess. Andy and I are doing a zoning ordinance for a township up north, just outside Traverse City, and they actually scrapped their parking requirement as part of this zoning update. They didn't completely do away with it, but they kind of set these very general lower limits and then an upper limit, and they're going to experiment with letting the market drive it completely. Just tell us what you think you need, and we'll be following that.
Well, and is it
it'll
a dense city already?
No, it's not. It's a township. It's outside of.
So they
Traverse
might
City.
be wanting to just bring development there. That's
Well,
their.
to a degree. Yeah, right, up by the lake is built out. But otherwise, no, it's pretty rural, actually. So that's going to be an interesting experiment. And there's other communities around the state doing that too, but,
Well, and I've always found when I look to like Royal Oak and Troy that we're pretty, and maybe it's because, like you said, we've all used the same criteria to set ours,
Yeah.
but they've also looked at theirs again. And Troy runs theirs through some, I forget what it is, but there's some system that they run it through.
yeah, I think it's an ITE-based system.
It is.
Yeah.
And so but it seems like they're pretty, in line with what we require. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look at it or anything, but I just always found it interesting, especially when builders come in front of us and they're like, "You're way off," and I'm like, "Oh, don't you build in Royal Oak too?" Because they kind of follow the same guide. I just don't want to feel pressured to like, forego all parking, because that's a
No,
little
yeah,
crazy.
I would not suggest that.
Yeah.
More just what is the data that's available? Because I hate when people,
Sure.
approach with one-sided perspective, and it's hard to sit here and say, do we need to revisit or not? It'd be helpful to have that data. You just mentioned that Royal Oak is similar, but I don't know, I've seen that table laid out in detail, and that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, if we're gonna do master plan, and we're gonna look at what data do we have available, what tools could we do to, reassess, that would be like critical for me to be able to see all that information in one place.
It does
Sure.
get like a rabbit hole kind of a little, right? Like all
Oh, yeah.
ordinances, right? Because
You can
Royal
keep
Oak
going.
establishes density different than us. So like, and even Troy establishes density different than we do.
Most communities do, yeah.
Yeah, so it gets very complicated. I don't know. But it would be nice if you did all that for us, Joe.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part of the follow-up project.
Yeah.
It's when you actually get into the assessment, pull all that data together.
And I think the only reason I brought it up was because of your point earlier too, right? We want to drive certain types of development, right? If we say we want more families, we want bigger units, if there is a barrier for that, then we need to have information to be able to look at it and say, do we need to change this or not? And we might find out we don't need to, and it's fine, but we also might find out that, yeah, there is a reason, as Joe mentioned, that we're not getting the type of development we want, or multifamily.
Right, and it
you
could
know,
be the difference of a
actual-
car here or there. Yeah.
Right, if they feel like it's too burdensome. So
Yeah, I
just-
agree.
Something that I've heard a few times from the past year and a half that I would
Yeah, is there
see more
a,
in detail.
and maybe this isn't uniform across the planning commission, but is there a way to build into that actual language that we, would like to incentivize certain types of building or certain types of, as we're
Yeah,
moving
I mean-
forward, we're looking to bring more families here and to establish a more, and I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but I think the city pretty much is all going that way, to bring that type of development and look at it through that lens. And of course, your lens as well, Joe, of, being more strategic about where it might be, and if, we can work on relationships, I guess, with other people to make it more efficient. That's, is that what you're saying? Like, kind of have a goal in mind when we look at
I
it?
mean, my perspective is there's levers to pull if you want to make it a more family-friendly town, right? And we're talking about, the possibility of making it more walkable, right? We have a whole module on school and the development of that, which is a big component. And then for me, when we look at kind of this debate around multifamily units, right? We always say there's too much efficiency units. We'd rather have more 2-3 bedrooms, but what I've heard without data supporting it in many cases is that the parking requirement that we have is a burden and there's a restriction from them building those larger units. So for me, I just want to make sure if we can, one of the easiest levers, rather than trying to incentivize or build
Right.
relationships, is just to make sure we don't have a specific barrier or burden on the builder that's stopping that type of development.
Right.
Right, that's easier than trying to incentivize something.
For sure, yeah.
So that's all I'm trying to say.
No, I agree. And so we'll change efficiency units, you need 3 spots. 3 bedrooms, you need 1. We'll have them make up for it. No?
So Joe, I'm not sure if that's something that we could outline a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know if there's other, within parking, that's just the one critical one that I could always think about.
I mean, I think, yeah, the corridors do get into that a little bit more
Okay.
too. So yeah, what we're trying to incentivize and draw. So they'll dovetail a bit.
Okay.
But I can massage this language too and just sort of see what you think.
Thank you.
The future land use map, I just wanted to point out kind of what changed. One of the things that we've got on the future land use map from 2018 is this public, quasi-public category. And of course, Baker and Shalom were both public, quasi-public, so they've been changed. You can see them outlined here to single-family residential. For some reason, this parcel that's outlined at the south end of the BRD2 district was a different mixed-use category on the last future land use map. I've just brought it back into the BRD2 district on this map. And then the other black outlined areas on North Main and West 14 Mile, they were the same mixed-use category as the BRD1 district at the south end of Main Street, and I just separated them because I think they're distinct. The South Main corridor has a very unique character, and I think the North Main and 14 Mile just need to be their own category separate from that. I've highlighted one in red. You can see that it's kind of almost across the street from us. There is a church, now empty, that kind of juts back into the space between the houses facing Lincoln and the houses facing Fisher. And we should think about what we want that to be. How do we feel about that lot? Because you've got the lots that are on North Main, and I think mixed use 3 would be fine there, but it's this part that goes back
Yeah.
between those two.
Are you talking about the round dome
Yeah.
one?
Church
That's
has a
empty now?
very deep
Yeah.
lot there.
It's for
But isn't
sale.
it in between single family or
It
no?
is, yeah.
Okay,
So, yeah, everybody's backyard
Yep.
butts up to it.
yeah.
But there's no street frontage to put other single-family homes in there, so what do you do with that if it's not gonna be a church anymore?
There's no what? There's no street?
There's no
How
street that goes
wide
back
is that
there.
lot, though?
It's not super wide, it's like 100 feet maybe?
But it does have a drive that goes all the way back, correct?
Yeah, there's a parking lot back there.
Okay. And this is a lot of mixed uses. A lot, like, isn't this more than, this is how many we have?
It's actually the same amount that was on the 2018 future land use map, but they're just categorized a little differently. Well, the North Main bit is new.
So we're gonna have multifamily in every area except for, I mean, because City Center has
Well, BRD2 doesn't include it.
BRD two. I don't see that on your future land
This whole
use.
thing over here, that's the district, sorry, it's the mixed use too. That doesn't include it,
The mixed use two does not include multifamily?
no.
Isn't mixed use multifamily in its name? Like, what do you,
No, I mean, you can mix office and commercial or other uses too.
oh, okay, so I guess where's that defined at?
Well, I mean, it'd be defined in descriptions of these categories. So the 2018 master plan, which I neglected to include the descriptions of these categories, does actually define each of these categories. And we would have to add a description for mixed use 3. But it's not really going to be all that different from what was described in the 2018 master plan.
I don't remember there being mixed use up there, or, I guess I have to
So
look at
the
this.
one on North Main was office in the last one, so that's changed. But the 14 Mile was a mixed-use district, and it was the same as the BRD1. But I think that BRD1 is distinct. It's kind of its own thing. So I've separated them into two different. BRD1 is mixed-use 1 down at the south end of Maine. And then the one that was established on West 14 Mile in the last master plan has been separated out as mixed-use 3. So that we can do something distinctive with it, rather than just whatever we're doing in BRD1.
So is that mixed use on, that's outlined in black, is that, was that mixed use before, or?
The one on
It's
West
a vacant-
14 Mile
yeah.
was.
It's
The
a
one on
vacant
North
lot,
Main was
that
not.
large vacant lot there?
He's talking south of Elmwood.
Yeah, south of Elmwood. And now it's all multifamily, just south of Elmwood. Was that always multifamily?
That's multifamily today.
No, well, Joe, but he came here for a PUD for that. That was BRD too. Are you talking Roth?
on
Is that
Elmwood?
Roth?
The stuff south of
Baker
Elmwood?
Baker Roth,
Huh?
and Hendrickson.
The stuff south of Elmwood?
Yeah, it's south of Elmwood, so it's off of Main Street. and
Oh, yeah, that
Hendrickson,
was all,
Baker, and
that
Roth.
was all multifamily on the last future land use map. It's been multifamily on like the last 3 or 4 future land use
You're
maps.
saying future land use, which is different than our zoning?
Yeah, it is different from zoning.
Okay. I guess I want to see our other,
Yeah, the Roth
Future.
in Maine was office on the last,
yeah.
yeah.
This is a lot of multifamily.
Well, that's the thing, though, it's not all multifamily. It's gonna be
Mixed
mostly
use.
commercial. It's mostly commercial now. Multifamily might be an option in some of those areas. Some of it is zone multifamily on West 14 Mile. But we're trying to bring some flexibility to those areas and also, over time, get a more consistent form through those corridors. And like I said, all that 14 miles, so that's what it is today on your future land use map. It's
So
only
is
North
core,
Main that
core
changed.
residential, is that, what kind of density do we allow there?
Core residential is,
Duplex, right?
yeah,
Or-
basically duplex, you could do townhomes, that kind of thing. It's attached single family, for lack of a better term.
Because I think we have to be really careful in turning so many sites into a mixed use, because there's so many people that have come in here and been affected in a way that I think it's important to consider, especially with the PUD the way it is, in the way that things seem to happen with building, mixing uses and our PUD, they could end up into something that we didn't imagine. And
Well,
they're,
the idea of doing this mixed-use district is that you don't get PUDs, because you can do multifamily there, but there are parameters on it.
but is there something that stops someone from taking a PUD to a mixed use? Is that in an ordinance?
No, I mean, unless you write your PUD language that way. I mean, the PUD is effective in any district right now, the way it's written.
Right. So, I mean, while you say it might not happen, I would argue that our job is to plan for what might happen or might not happen. I don't know.
Well, yeah, but you're trying to give it less of a reason to happen. If you're not happy with the way your PUDs are coming in and turning out, you're trying to build a district that makes things more predictable by putting regulations in place that say, here's what happens in this district. Yes, someone could potentially come in with a PUD there if you don't change your PUD language. But if you're allowing a mixed-use building or multifamily in the district and you've already put parameters on it and you have some design standards, if someone just comes in with a site plan, you know what you're getting because you've developed that district. And someone doesn't have to do a PUD to do multifamily there. It's just permitted, and if they follow the rules, they can just do it.
Well, that's the problem. I mean, because
But
really.
why is it a problem?
Well, because there's a lot of PUDs that come in and they're looking to, they don't want to adhere to certain ordinances
Yeah,
that
but
they
we're
want to
talking
follow.
about a site plan. So if someone comes in with a site plan, if someone wants to do multifamily down West 14 Mile, and
Mm-hmm.
we know at least one developer did.
Too. I mean, you got Burger King there, I guess Burger
Yeah,
King.
well, yeah, true.
Yeah.
So we know there's demand. If they see, oh, I can do multifamily here, and here are the parameters under which I can do it, a site plan is a much less strenuous process than a PUD.
I agree 1,000%
I mean,
with that.
they don't have a reason to come in with a PUD if they can just meet some rules and build multifamily. And that's the reason, I mean, the reason that one multifamily that's getting built down on West 14 Mile is getting built there is because it was zoned multifamily. And, he had a couple variances, but ultimately, he knew he had some rules to meet and he could build his multifamily there. He didn't do a PUD there because he didn't have to. And, if we don't provide more flexibility down these districts, you probably will see more PUDs because,
Unless we put language in.
well, yeah, you could potentially do that. But the thing is, you want predictability. So you want to build out districts that meet demand, but also put some parameters on it and give you the kind of development that you're looking for. And, you know, I mean, I know people seem to have this perception that multifamily is like the craziest thing that could go behind their house, but a commercial use versus a multifamily use, I just don't see it personally.
Well, I mean, maybe you've never looked out your back window to
I've
see
lived
someone
next to
clearing in your
multifamily, I've
window.
lived in multifamily.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've lived over the wall from commercial too.
I mean, I've shown many
It's-
homes that you look out your kitchen window and you see an apartment building there and it's like, no, thanks, no.
I mean-
So it does affect people, and it's something that I think we need to consider, is that it
But that's-
affects a lot of neighbors when we're taking 6 different zones and turning them into multifamily.
Well, and that's part of the problem with that corridor right now, though, is that it's 6 different zones. It's a hodgepodge. And when we talked about this back in the fall, we talked about designing the district so that the thing you just talked about, the window right there over the fence, isn't a problem because things are moved up closer to the street.
But we also talked about filling a missing middle of a transition with townhomes. In this, I don't know the language to these, but I don't know how this conveys the transition from a very dense to a lesser dense, with that missing middle where we're infilling condos, families, home ownership. I don't see that. Maybe it's in the language somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, the home ownership thing, maybe there's things we can do to incentivize that, but we can't dictate that.
I didn't say we had to
So
dictate it, but I
there's-
do think that there's lots of communities around us that are building nothing but those things. They don't have just apartments going in, they've got a mixture. And if you want a mixture of housing, then I think it's
Well,
worthy to look at
If you
that.
want a mixture of housing, you have to put it in your zoning ordinance and establish the parameters under which you want it. If we don't do that, if we're not permitting it down this West 14-mile corridor, and the only way someone can do it is with a PUD, they're gonna come in with a PUD.
Joe, there's
if we
already
put-
multifamily there.
Yeah, there is multifamily there. The thing is, there's also a lot of commercial that goes in and out. You have to look at the whole corridor and think about it as a district instead of just like a little, like of this here and a little bit of this here. Think about how it could look in the future if things redeveloped kind of in a more uniform way where things were coming up closer to the street and you have some multifamily mixed in with some of the commercial, and it's all done under the same set of parameters that we establish. It gives you control.
Joe, I
And-
do see that, but I also see Robertson-style homes that are condos that are up against the sidewalk with parking in back, and San
Right,
Francisco
and
style.
we can get that
Right.
if we put it in our zoning ordinance.
Well, and I think we're talking the same language here then,
Yeah.
but that's where it's like, I feel like there has to be a distinction between that language for that product and a language
Sure.
for.
Yeah, and
a
that's- all we have to do is
35-foot. That's a
describe it.
lot different than a 35-foot building in your backyard.
Yeah, I mean, all we have to do is describe it, and that's really all I'm getting at is say what you want in the plan and then make a zoning district that does what you wanted in the plan. I mean, that's all I'm saying. And I really do think that, you know, we have a mentality in Southeast Michigan that our mile roads are just all commercial, and that's part of the reason we have so much vacant commercial in Southeast Michigan, is that we've just got too much linear commercial. So breaking some of that up with the condos or whatever is healthy for your overall commercial picture. You know, and I mean, I can't tell you what the kind of demand is going to be down that corridor in terms of that style of housing, but it's been built up and down Rochester Road, so I don't think that there's necessarily like an aversion to putting it on a mile road. But that's what you have to say in your master plan is, in this corridor, this is what we're looking for. And then you have to put together a district that does that. And that's not what we have down there right now.
Right.
We have a little bit of B1, we have a little bit of RM1, we have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And the office zoning is not particularly useful in the current environment. So I think that really needs to go, and there needs to be more flexibility in those areas.
So you're gonna take office out completely?
No, not
that's what I was
necessarily.
gonna
I
ask
mean, you've got some on here still because that's already office, you know.
Yeah, I think it's
developed.
important to simplify the just obnoxious amount of different zoning that we have in that region right there.
Sure,
But
yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you have a definition for mixed use 3? It seems like that's you created that designation.
Yeah,
don't
and that's
have that,
really what
yeah.
we're talking about right now is what does that look like? What is, what
So you
is
don't
the
have a definition
for
today,
it?
but you're
I don't
thinking
have
about-
one written for you right now.
But Joe,
What type of density were you thinking with the different mixed uses, though? Like, what made you delineate 1, 2, or 3, or you just thought these are 3 different distinct
Well,
areas?
the size of the lots down in, so 2 is its own thing. It's all those industrial properties and commercial properties along Maple Road. It's not similar to the other ones really in any way. Doesn't include residential, so we're,
But I thought we talked about keeping industrial, because industrial was our,
yeah, that's the idea, is that that's one of the uses that's available there.
but it's gonna be labeled mixed use as an industrial?
But that's already what it is. It's already the BRD2 district. And that is, it doesn't include residential, but it is a mixed-use, commercial, industrial office district.
So you're saying mixed use 2 is commercial
Industrial office,
and, okay.
yeah.
Joe, wasn't one of your takeaways that you're going to provide us categories for this draft map, correct?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I've got,
To make it easy.
most of these are described in the previous plan already. It's just the mixed-use 3 that isn't.
Because this will come back for our discussion again, right?
And the mixed-use 1 at the south end, I think that's very distinctive from the others, just by virtue of the lot sizes and what's already down there. So I think that ought to remain as a separate category.
And would that be, in your idea, a denser use? Is like 1 the
Right
least dense or the
now-
most dense?
Right now, 1 doesn't actually include any residential uses. And the BRD1 district also does not include any residential uses. So what's actually on our zoning map does not include residential. And the 2018 master plan didn't actually call for a move away from that. So it's really just mixed use 3, because right now, mixed use 1 in the 2018 plan talks about residential uses and things, so that would affect the mixed use 1 at the south end of Maine as well. Whereas I'm trying to focus it at the other ports here that I've called mixed use 3.
So did you say that's a higher density?
Well, it wouldn't be any density at all because there's no residential.
Oh, so what's that mixed use gonna be? Business and commercial?
It's yeah, kind of commercial, like legacy commercial for
No,
the
in the
most part.
future land use.
Yeah, the stuff at the south end of Maine.
Yeah.
It's not really changing.
Oh, you don't wanna put residential there at all?
We could potentially, but I'm not calling for it at the moment. But we could.
So you're saying like not mixed use within one building, you're saying the corridor or that
It's
little
more
zone
like the
itself has
corridor,
mixes of
yeah,
uses?
Or maybe you do office on an upper floor and commercial on the ground floor or something like that.
Okay,
So are you considering all like church land, public, quasi-public?
That's how it was done in the last master plan, and we've carried that forward. The zoning ordinance does have a like transition of non-residential use provision in it that talks about what happens with that land. But yes, all the churches and other the Jaffet School and a couple other things, those are all listed as public, quasi-public on here.
So like that parking lot, I mean, could that be used as public? Like, so like the church parking lot that's that we were just talking about, that's off of Main Street. So if that's designated public to some degree. I mean, is that like the parking lot available to some degree, being that it is zoned public?
It just
Well,
might
it's-
not be
Like,
usable.
what I'm saying is, can we use it?
Talking about like overflow parking.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the restaurant, like
Yeah.
it's gravy, right? Is like always overflowing.
Yeah.
Right.
You could tell people they could park in that lot,
If it's public.
solve a problem potentially.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quasi-public, which it's privately owned at the moment, but there
Yeah.
may be the potential for some sort of arrangement to use it there as,
Do you know how big that land is there, Joe? How many, is it, it's a pretty deep
Yeah,
lot.
it's very deep.
it's, let me see.
Well, let's see.
Don't you think you could build like 2 houses on that lot?
You could build, well, there's already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. You could probably build 12 50-foot lots, which is what City
12
Plaza is.
50-foot lots?
Yeah, because there's already 12 50-foot lots here.
Oh, right,
Mirroring
yeah.
it.
But how would you do like a street?
It'd
or
have to be
something,
like a
right?
dead-end street, like
Cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
like a cul-de-sac kind
Yeah,
of thing.
It'd be yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's enough space for an actual public road down there. It's only 140
I mean, there's a
feet
drive
wide.
though, right? And if there's only, like, 6 to 12 houses, when it's a dead-end road, would it be a very,
I'm just going off of the map scale, but yeah, it might not be, it might be a little too narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the total acreage there is 2.2, but it's long
Oh.
and narrow.
Yeah, like, how would you
2.2.
redevelop that kind of space with a place of worship that
It's
goes out?
really tough. I
and
mean,
it's-
if you handed that property to me and said, okay, what do you want to do with this? What I would probably do is a cottage court, little like low ranch units for seniors. That's probably what I would do there. It's perfect for that.
You could probably do a private drive though, right? Does cost
Yeah.
allow that?
Yeah, I don't.
And that would allow, that would give a little more flexibility, provided that it is wide enough.
Yeah,
Private drive would.
yeah. I mean, I don't know.
I feel like we had to have at one point in time, we have all these weird alley things going on everywhere,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
It's actually zoned R2 at the
Okay.
moment. That the back part of it, the up front part of it's zoned, I think, office. But it is zoned R2 in the back portion.
is it currently for sale?
It is, yeah.
Do you know the price or no?
No.
I was gonna say, buy it up, man. Put some houses there.
But it is the kind of thing where, like, if there could be acquired as public property, you could do an RFP for something, and figure out what you want back there and actually
It's
ask
an
people to give
interesting
you offers
space
to do
too.
it.
We have no green space in that part of the city.
Sure.
Not that we have money to do something.
Even
Yeah.
that's not really green space because it's
you
parking.
know what I'm saying, but like, there's
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Hunter, I guess, has
Hunter,
a soccer field, but
Yeah.
really that's it for that whole portion of the city.
Do you see what they're building on the north side of Elmwood there too? Like the industrial or?
Oh, the old contaminated lot there on the
Yeah,
corner?
yeah. I mean, it's pretty low. It's not like it's high or anything, but it looks like it's gonna be like no green left there when they're done with it. It's pretty much gone.
What is it?
I think they call it an industrial, it's like shops and stuff.
Yeah, it's like an industrial condo, basically.
Yeah, it's nothing, I hesitate to say industrial because it's not like they're gonna have smokestacks coming out of there. It seems like a pretty light use, but it seems like it's parking and building and that's it. It's gonna be pretty different to see that there.
It's like a lot of the north side of Elmwood, really.
Right,
there,
with all the
which is,
apartments, yeah.
Well, I was talking about when you go down Elmwood there, with all the industrial buildings. That's all.
Oh, on the
it's
east
all
side?
parking and
Yeah.
building. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
So someone could buy that church and turn in a PUD,
Potentially.
just throwing it out there.
Was there anything else on this map, Joe, you wanted to highlight?
No, that was it. Last item, and just given the hour, I guess I'll kind of just try to blast through it a little bit, but, because we did talk about this pretty extensively back in the fall, but, The first part of the infrastructure chapter, I've got the roads portion, but not the stormwater portion here. So we've got the thoroughfare plan. There's the last master plan had one, but it used some terminology that doesn't quite match up with the National Functional Classification, so I'm just trying to rectify that. And also identify major collectors versus minor collectors, because it identifies a bunch of collector roads, but really, Elmwood's the only major collector road you have. It's a half-mile road, goes all the way through. It's got lights at the ends, not the far east end on Rochester, but the part that's all the way in Clawson does. All the others are at best minor collectors. Some of the ones around downtown, they're collectors insofar as they can take vehicles directly from multiple uses, but otherwise they're local roads.
Joe, can you tell me what page you're on? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Are you on the new packet you gave us?
Yeah, exactly. It's got the blank first page.
Okay.
But getting more to the meat of it, on page, it's 29 of that document, into the complete streets component. We've provided some kind of background on what complete streets is, why complete streets are a required element of master planning in Michigan, some of the benefits that they tend to bring to communities. And then we get into non-motorized plan. So there's a little bit of the why there. A little bit about safety for non-motorized road users who are non-motorized road users. So anyone traversing our streets without the aid of an automobile is a non-motorized road user. That includes a person walking their dog, walking to run an errand, riding a bike, skateboarding, any number of other activities. Importantly, non-motorized travel is the only independent travel option for some residents, including anyone under 16 years old, people without driver's licenses or who do not own vehicles, people unable to use their arms or legs to drive, the blind, cognitively disabled people, and some seniors. So that's kind of the foundation for why we're talking about non-motorized transportation. We talk about bike infrastructure, and we've got some information here on, it's page 33 of the handout, about levels of traffic stress. And what this really does is it talks about kind of what kind of bicyclist you might be. Some people they'll ride in anything. They'll go out on a major road and they'll ride right along with traffic. It's kind of the strong and fearless LTS 4 category there. A lot more people fall into LTS 1, interested but cautious riders. And then you've got kind of a couple categories in the middle. And then it shows some of the types of bicycle infrastructure that those people might be comfortable using. And we've got some notes about how safety can be improved for non-motorized users, and that leads into the discussion of traffic calming, which we had back in the fall. And then we've also got our bike route map here. So I've provided kind of a summary of all the traffic calming methods that we discussed. And then I've done a little bit on page 39 here about applying traffic calming measures in Clawson. And I'm not expecting anybody to be like light on their feet here responding to me. Like, seriously, take some time to read this and like comment on it next time. I'm just sort of trying to walk through it. One thing I did call out in applying traffic calming measures in Clawson is Lincoln Avenue, which we've heard about a couple times. It was in the context of a development proposal, but what we heard from the residents who spoke is that there's already a problem. So it's something that needs to be addressed no matter what happens with this corner over here. So I've talked about that in here, and then finally there, at the end of this document, there's a road maintenance framework, which really just talks about, okay, how do we assess the quality of our roads? How do we how do we consider when we're doing our capital improvement planning what roads need to be addressed. And we included, this is from the city engineer Anderson, Eckstein, and Westrick, the PASER map. So PASER stands for Pavement Surface Evaluation and Rating System. It's the statewide standard as adopted by the Michigan Asset Management Council. And what it does is it assesses street conditions. I've put a little table in here saying what the ratings mean. So when you're looking at the map, these colors actually mean something. Because if you thought 1 was the best possible rating and 10 was the worst possible rating, you're going to come away from the map with a very different conclusion than you would if you know what they actually mean. So I thought that was pretty important. But we've got a decent amount of red, which is rated 1, which is the worst possible rating on this map. A fair amount of pink and purple as well, which are the next two categories. 10 is basically a brand new road, like you just did it. So really, it's pretty rare you're ever going to see a 10 on a map like this. But 9, and this was done in 2022, by the way, so there have been a couple roads that have been done since then. But it's done about every 4 years. But, you can see South Crooks Road and like a tiny little bit of Church are the only things rated a 9 on the entire map. So, we've got a street system of a certain age. And where you see these concentrations of red, those tend to be subdivisions that were put in all at once. All the roads have reached that certain age at the same time. And so there's a great deal of demand concentrated in certain areas for improvements. And you're never going to be able to do everything you want to do in a year. So, we discuss a little bit about, how do we balance, okay, we've got this much available to us for funding. We can maybe rebuild one of the really bad roads and then do minor repairs on a bunch of others, and that's the best way to spread the money around that year. The next year, rebuilding several of the bad roads might be the best way to apply the money. The year after that, you might not rebuild anything. You might just do preventative maintenance and spot repairs and things. So it might vary from year to year, but nevertheless, we have a framework for thinking about it. And that's really, it for my comments this evening. Like I said, spend some time with this and read it and come with comments next time. But and then we'll be feeding you more of this between now and then as well. But thank you for the discussion tonight.
Joe,
And
sorry,
if you've got anything else,
I have a question. So is that how it's gonna work? Like you'll show us the modules, the next meeting will be comments, and then we move on to the next module? Is that how we're doing? Okay.
yeah. Yep.
That concludes our discussion, so we'll move on to agenda item number 9 is other business. Does anyone have any other business going on?
Joe, I have a question, if that's okay at this time.
Sure.
About did you look into the ordinance that we spoke about last time? And is that something that we're going to put on a certain agenda, or?
I have notes about this, and I did research on it 2 weeks ago, and now I'm completely blanking on it.
I don't expect you to present it to me right now. I just didn't know if we could put it on the
Which one was
next.
it again? Just remind me. Because
For
Nick and I
the
were talking
vacant,
about
or for
40 things too.
change of use
Oh, yeah,
ordinance.
yeah,
The public signage.
Yes, I have looked into that, and I actually probably will have a report for you next time.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Never mind, I lost my other thought.
Along the same lines, at last meeting that we had, I requested that you look into our ordinances on the balcony dimensions and the sidewalk overhangs.
Yes, and I have looked at that as well.
Because I was quite shocked that you can build something over our sidewalk. I want to look at that ordinance, review it, bring it back to us. Let's look at it closer, see how we feel about that. I think it has to be changed myself.
Well, especially on a main street, right, in the
Yeah.
city center, yeah.
Yeah, right now it's not up to what I think it should be.
I would agree.
So that, if you can possibly bring that back on our next agenda, we'll have a discussion on
No,
that.
I don't think that'll be a problem for next time.
Okay, and then I see that you've answered Aaron's question about the Batter Street that was looked into by code enforcement, the building you asked.
Oh, I don't know.
Yes.
I didn't ask
It
that.
says that they looked into it and
Oh, yeah,
found no water usage there and that everything was taken care of.
okay.
That's taken care of.
And there's nothing, like, that's not a use right now?
I'm not familiar with the outcome of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Nick, of course, couldn't be.
Yeah, that was for Nick. Would it be better that we make motions for this, Joe, so it comes from the body for these actions?
As far as those two research items, I was instructed last time, so
Okay.
it's
Yeah, I
not a problem.
don't think it has to come in the form of a motion, but it might help. One thing, like Nick's not here tonight, but I'm sure he's going to listen to this and watch the video. I still have a problem when we get to the end of our thing here where we're talking about temporary CFOs and that kind of thing. On 288 West 14 Mile, it just says council and the property owner are coming to terms on an agreement. That's been a long time, and I don't know if legally we're not supposed to be sharing the agreement that they're reaching. I don't know where it stands legally on that, but from my position, we are the planning commission. This business has been there for 2 years with no site plan approval. So I'd like to know how it's being resolved. My attitude is they should come in here and get a site plan. That's simply where I'm standing.
Yeah, I think, did we address that with the attorney at all?
It used to be on here, no, the attorney's never, he just keeps telling me he's having meetings with them, but nothing's coming from it. It used to have dates on here when they had a temporary CFO. Actually, the dates are taken off of this thing right now.
Well, I mean,
It's wide
even
open.
if we're not, even if it's like out of our technical legal hands, it would be nice for the city attorney maybe to come in here and show us the
To give
site
us-
plan so
Give
that.
us an explanation how a business can operate in the city without a temporary or permanent site plan approval. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it's something that belongs in our realm, so I think it should be, so I'd like, if, Nick, if you're seeing this, please, put a report together for us. Aside from that, we can move on to staff report and training opportunities, which is usually Nick's thing. It's,
I just know Mr. Stepnitz submitted his report to you. Any questions directed to him? I think the main point was the Batter property that they looked into that and I didn't find anything.
good, if he gets back to me on 288, I'll be happy with that. We have no legal updates tonight because we have no lawyer. And unless somebody else has anything to comment on or bring up, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion,
Support.
or, can I have a roll call, please?
Okay, Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Solomon,
Yes.
Mr. Colbert? Mr. Tinlin?
Yes.
Mr. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Casera?
Yes. Thank you, everyone.